The following podcast is not relating to my teachings and work at Del Cedar Medical Center and is for entertainment purposes only. Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the Life of Flow podcast. Today, we had the great pleasure of having Teri Yates come join us. Teri is the CEO of Accountable Physician Advisors. I met Teri some years ago. I was checking out a private practice, a very successful private practice, and I was incredibly impressed about the processes and the logistics. And I got to meet Teri, and Teri had a lot to do about informing and advising that physician. And she seemed like a very genuine person, a person that of high integrity. Her name always stuck in my mind. And we had a conversation some time ago with Jerry Kim, and the concept of advisors to start your own practice came up, and I immediately thought about Teri. So we're very grateful that she spent some time with us, and I hope you guys enjoy it.
It was very, very interesting. Again, one of those where I learned a lot, and so somehow what you bring to the pod is almost like a lot for me, and then when I bring people to the pod is a lot for you. So
funny how that works.
All right, look at us.
Vamos.
Look at us.
Two vascular surgeons walk into a bar and come out with a podcast. We are talking everything vascular and not. Welcome to the Life of Flow podcast.
Teri, thank you so much for being here. I met Teri several years ago. I don't remember exactly, maybe two years ago. And I was visiting a practice that came highly recommended. And I met Teri, and Teri was helping that physician, take his dream into reality. And it was very impressive, to be honest. I was very impressed by the processes, by the logistics, everything kind of made sense. And I spent some time with Teri. We had a couple conversations because she was part of the hiring process. And I came out of that with a really kind of having her high esteem as like a person of high integrity and dedication to helping physicians succeed. So that's why Teri's here to tell us a little bit about her company, about her mission. So we're very grateful. Thank you, Teri.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate all of the high praise, and I was always sad you were the one that got away. I really wanted you to take that job, but I'm excited to be here today.
Teri, it's also, thank you very much. This is Miguel, and I wanted to take us back to when you elected to form this company, and what was the situation going on that led you to say, you know what, I'm just gonna take the bull by the horns and try to build a company out of this.
So my whole career has been in healthcare. That's all I've ever done. I'm 54. And when I was in 11 years ago, I was, 43. I was working as a C-level executive for a group of 150 radiologists. And I had spent 16 years in radiology. And it was a company that had private equity backing, and the investors, didn't like the pace the company was growing at, and so they were laying off a third of the non-physician workforce. So I sat down with the CEO and I said, look, what's the future look like for me? Because I was not in the first round of cuts. And he says, it's kind of tough, and there was definitely some uncertainty. So I was able to negotiate, a pretty good separation package, and found myself for the first time in my life unemployed. So I thought, I plan to open a consulting firm someday. That's my dream, but I'll do that when I'm in my 50s, when my kids are grown and out of college. So when I left Radisphere, my first thought was, I'll do a little consulting on the side while I'm looking for a real job. And what happened was I kept getting hired for projects, and it kept going along. And after a few months, I realized, I think this is my job. The time is right now. So I started out very lean. It was me in my spare bedroom starting this thing on my own. But 11 years later, now I have 9 amazing colleagues in the consulting firm. And then I'm also the majority owner and managing partner in a revenue cycle management firm and an ASC development company. And so that's been my journey. But really, I was just looking for something to keep my brain occupied until I found a real job. And here I am today.
That's awesome. Have you always focused on the cardiovascular side of things, or have you done consulting for others?
So not at all. When I first started and hung out my shingle, I thought I would do the kind of work in radiology that I had been doing in my most recent position. And so I was the chief of quality and risk and compliance for this big firm. And so when I first started, I got hired immediately by some of the largest radiology groups in the country to help them develop peer review programs and things like that. But, when you're starting a business and you're really trying to make it work, at least in my field, anybody with a pulse and a checkbook looks like a good client. And so a friend told me about an ophthalmology practice that was in deep trouble and sort of on the verge of, imploding because they didn't have a solid administrator. And I had never run a small private practice before. I was in higher level executive roles in healthcare, never in a hospital, but still, not that kind of job, but I stepped in and helped them a lot and worked with them over a couple of years. And then I got hired by a neurology group and I helped them a lot. And it was really kind of like boot camp for learning what goes wrong in a medical practice, and especially smaller private practices. That group had 9 physicians, the ophthalmologist had 3. So the first vascular surgeon that hired me was about my 3rd year in, and it was Chris Lassar. He was leaving his group and starting a new practice and said, I need someone to help me. And we had a mutual colleague who referred me to him. And he said, I need someone to help me start a practice in an OBL. And I said, what's an OBL? I had no background, didn't know anything about it. But it was a crazy project because he needed to move fast, very lean. He had a massive non-compete he had to buy out. And we started the business with him and his favorite nurse and his wife and a cell phone. And, less than 12 weeks later, we had a fully functioning practice and office-based lab, which I didn't understand at the time how challenging it is to do all of that quickly. We just did it and did it successfully. And then he stood up, on the podium the next year at OEIS and told that story. And we had a lot of people that were interested in working with us. So today, more than 50% of our practices in the cardiovascular specialties, and the vast majority have been historically vascular surgery. Although, we have cardiology clients and IR has picked up a lot in the last year or two. There's a lot more IR physicians going into private practice now.
Teri, we had a conversation with one of our very good friends, Dr. Jerry Kim, and he started his own private practice journey, by himself, and very lean. Miguel obviously has started his own private practice journey. Can you speak to the initial hurdles of someone that doesn't have a background in business, and how you kind of help guide them and coach them through it?
Well, there are logistical hurdles, and then there are potential experience gaps that can be troublesome if you don't have help. And from a logistical perspective, a physician who is trying to do this, but they are still employed, finding the time after you're busy, doing all your cases for the day, to then begin figuring out how to do all these other things or making the time can be troublesome, right? If you have to cut back on the number of cases you're doing in order to do this, then that financially can get expensive in a hurry. But the other issue I think that can be hard is just knowing how to do some things that are different. I mean, you have a really good point of view as a physician on how your clinic should operate, what kind of staffing you need. You know how to do and make decisions about things like that. But it may be, a little daunting to figure out how to go read the regulatory rules in a particular state and understand what the rules are in your particular area that you have to comply with. And every state is different. Or knowing how to go about setting up a health insurance program so that the employees that you want to recruit are going to have benefits. Doesn't mean you can't figure out how to do it, but there's a lot of things like that maybe a physician hasn't done before and isn't exactly sure where to start, or it might take them a long time to figure it out.
So where does your company start and end? And I guess, is that like an a la carte that there's an offering, or is it you have a very cookie cutter model that's kind of what works for you, and you don't like to deviate too much from that?
So we are the opposite of cookie cutter. So philosophically, kind of like, here's my view of the world. Every client is different. Every client has different resources. They have different experience. I mean, we've worked with physicians who have an MBA, and we've worked with physicians that are, very early, they are fresh out of fellowship and they've never even, worked before in a private practice. And so, if you've got a mentor who really taught you an awful lot about business, you may need different things than that very early career doctor. Or if you are trying to get someone that is really dear to you involved in the project right from the start, one of our clients, his wife had an MBA, and the plan from the beginning was she was going to be his administrator. And so, we worked alongside her from the start, but the amount of services that we provide in a situation like that is very different than another guy we did a project for where he and his wife are both physicians, and neither one of them really had the time to get involved. And so we took a greater lead. So we're very flexible, but the biggest thing I think that's important philosophically is our view of our place in the whole situation, because physicians are the value creators. And what we believe is that you should never give away equity in your business to someone who is just giving you business advice. There are ways that you can get support without giving someone else control of your business. And, listen, I started my company so long ago and I stuck with it because I value autonomy. I like to be in charge of my business. And all of the clients we work with feel exactly the same way. And it's important because everybody that we start working with, you trained in a hospital, or maybe you were employed in a hospital. And so most of the physicians we work with come in with a lot of distrust of administrators, because they worked in an environment where they didn't have the amount of control that they were looking for. So, we take a lot of pains to make sure that we know our role. And it is not to manage someone's practice. It is not to make decisions for a physician. It is not to tell them what to do. It is to support them and to coach them. Give you information about what our experience tells you might work well so that you can make an informed decision about what makes the most sense in your business.
Have you turned anybody? I'm sorry. I apologize. Wrap up.
So I was just going to say, but to where we start and end, so we get hired when somebody's thinking about doing this from the beginning. We get hired by existing practices that want to optimize something or have a growth strategy. We provide some ongoing services if somebody's interested. So we have an accounting service line. We'll do accounting, obviously revenue cycle, but anywhere in the life cycle of the business we can plug in.
Have you, in your process of, I guess at the beginning, as you start, as a physician is vetting you, and I'm guessing you vet a physician, have you ever been in a situation where you're like, I don't think that you should do this? Like, I'm looking at your capacity, I'm looking at your numbers, I'm looking at your non-competes. There are so many threats to your model that my advice is do not seek independence. Your numbers, your performance, they just are not going to hit the road.
Routinely. So if someone is interested in starting a new practice, what we say the first step is let us do a feasibility study with you where we get a good evidence-based pro forma built. We look at the market conditions, what you're up against, and try to figure out what this is going to need, what it's going to take financially to get it off the ground, and what the rewards are going to be for you. And a pro forma is a hope and a guess, and it's a scientific sort of process to make sure that the guess is as close to reality as it can be. So it's never guaranteed, but if you do it right, it's pretty important. And a third of the feasibility studies we do, our advice to the physician is this isn't going to turn out the way you'd like it to. And we would, listen, we could tell people this is a great idea and then charge them a lot of money to help them build something, but I'm not interested in taking someone's money to help them fail. So sometimes the best answer is don't do this.
I was about to say, I think that's probably one of the things that probably gives you the most credibility, because it is in your company's best financial interest to keep that doctor engaged, thinking he could do it, paying you a ton of money, while in the back end, you would know that he's going to fail miserably within the next, 9 to 12 months. And then he has to Chapter 11 and go back to work, and you go on, right? So I mean, praises to you, kudos to you, because I think that really, you want to have you want to go to sleep at night, and you want to be okay with the person that you see in the mirror in the mornings. So I think this is huge, Teri.
Is there anything, Miguel? Yeah, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Teri. Sorry.
So I was just going to say, we counted it up recently. And since I started the practice 11 years ago, we've worked with 80 different physician groups on different projects. They're not all startups, but a whole lot of them are. And knock on wood, so far, we have not had one client fail.
Wow.
But here's another question that may be a little bit hard to answer, but has the percentage of denials, or let's say advices to not move forward, in the more contemporary phase of your company become bigger, given the contracted nature of the reimbursement?
Yeah. So it's harder to do this than it was 3 or 4 years ago because there's less reimbursement. You have to have more cases to make it work. The other reason I would say that percentage has increased a little bit is because we've had so many interventional radiologists thinking about these projects, and they've got something that's it's a bigger challenge than vascular surgeons have, which is hospital privileges. Radiology groups have exclusive contracts at hospitals, and if you are part of that group and you decide to leave, then you may be leaving behind the right to still see patients in that hospital. And so sometimes that's a really tough thing for them to overcome. So yeah, but I mean, still, the majority of our projects look good and move forward.
Is the margin still there? Sorry, I'm on a roll. Would you say that today, with acceptable volumes, is the margin still today there for successful OBLs, not ASCs, OBLs?
Yes.
Okay.
Miguel, in your experience, when did you start this private practice journey? How long has it been?
We opened January.
No, but before that, when you started, like thinking about it.
I've been thinking about it for a long time.
Yeah, but started moving forward with it. The build and stuff. How long did the build take and all that?
Yeah, it was when she said that she was able to do it in 12 weeks or 14 weeks, she was able to get Chris up. No, that was not our journey. It took us probably about a year to get everything done.
Yeah.
To get to operational conditions where we had everything moving, where, we have a little bit of a different thing because it's like, wound care clinic, hyperbarics, office-based cath lab, ultrasound diagnostics and stuff like that. And I would say that everything took us a little bit. a little bit longer.
And during that process, are there any particular points where there was a gap in knowledge that you would have wished that, in a specific area that you would have wished you would have somebody assisting you or helping you?
Yeah.
Any particular specific point in that?
You invite me to your podcast, and I'll tell you everything that we failed at. It's been really hard. I wouldn't say that it's not for the faint of heart. I'll say that, and probably because of I could go into details, but we did have advisory people, but I think that they failed us, to be very honest. Huge pain point. I'll give you for example, something really, really dumb. When they first went to open our Medicare number, because you have to apply to get a Medicare, a tax ID or a Medicare, whatever. They didn't even apply as vascular surgery practice. They applied as a multi-specialty group. And that taxonomy, it's called the baseline taxonomy denomination, essentially sets everything up. And then we started getting denied by every single contract. And we had no idea what was going on. And then I finally, bypassed the people who were hypothetically helping us. And I went straight to the source, and they're like, "You're a multi-specialty internal medicine group." And I said, "No, we're not. I'm a vascular surgeon." But this was because we had the hyperbaric medicine and the podiatry and the wound care stuff. But essentially, the taxonomy was we're a vascular surgery clinic offering also this and this under my supervision. And so then we had to go back to Medicare, change the taxonomy. And then after the taxonomy was changed, then bling, 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 all these other things started happening. So that's just one example of like
how long did that process take?
Oh, that was 4 months out the window. 4 months of no income, no productivity, of even worse, because you're already hiring people, because you need people hired to get some of these processes rolling. So obviously Teri's just nodding there because she's like, yeah, I could have helped you. I could have told you that.
I really want to say that 12 weeks is insane. Like, you should not try to do what we did. It was stressful, very stressful, but it's a 6 to 9 month process normally for us. Normally the rate limiter is construction. So we can move usually as fast as you can get the construction figured out, or in the second rate limiter can be credentialing, as you said. So that's also, kind of a 6 to 9 month process. And it depends on where you are in the country and which payer specifically you're talking about. But yeah, little tiny mistakes like that don't seem in the moment like so important can really sideline you. And so, sometimes people are skeptical about paying us because they're like, hey, listen, you're, it's going to cost a lot of money to hire you to get involved. And for most of our projects, we don't charge a fixed fee. We have a few things we charge a fixed fee for, but usually we're by the hour, just like your accountant or something. But we give a ballpark and say, okay, this is, typically if we're doing all the work, you're probably looking for an OBL and a new practice startup of, 90 to 100 grand in fees. And, that sounds like a huge number. And then if I can show them the performance, I can say, if I get you open 2 weeks faster, all of the opportunity cost associated with that delay that you would have had otherwise, more than covers our fees.
Peanuts.
Yeah.
100K is peanuts. And, when you look at all the money that we lost.
Yeah. 4 months.
100K was peanuts.
Yeah.
And all for just these really dumb decisions.
Teri, when a physician's looking at a market that, I imagine some people are going to be familiar with that market, working in that market for some years. What should they look for in their initial assessment of the market to see if there's space for them in that market?
Well, I'm a little, so I'm very confident. And what I mean by that is you can be successful starting a new business in a market where there's no competition or a crowded market. However, what you really got to look at is if you're in a crowded market, how's everybody else operating? What are they doing? So the way to really win and build your business, in my opinion, is on service. And, the how fast you see the patient for the consult is really, really critical. How committed are you to picking up the phone and talking to those physicians who give you a shot and refer to you and really developing a rapport with them? How reliable is your front desk at making sure that, every referral is responded to quickly and chased all the way to the ground? Because you get referrals every day that somebody from the physician office sent the case to you, but the patient doesn't answer their phone. And if your front desk person just says, well, the patient never called back, then they show up for follow-up with their doctor 3 months later and nothing has happened with the vascular consult, that doesn't build your business. So, I look at the number of people in the market, and that's certainly a part of it, but it's also how well are those people serving the market that you have to look at. And then obviously, what's the hospital situation? If you can continue to practice in the hospital and, get call compensation and be part of the call rotation, hey, that's an income that can help you in the beginning, but it's also referrals.
And a stream of patients.
So
yeah,
exactly.
Yep. That's one thing that I got hit with, which when I was planning this whole thing, I wasn't planning it without call. And
you were planning it with call.
Right. Well, yes. So yes and no in a way. And I guess what I want to say is I had undermined the importance of call in my volume. So when you look at, like, you're at Del Seton, you're at a big institution, you're taking call every so often, look back and think about how many of your patients did you get through call or call-related things. In hindsight, I think it was almost about half of my time, about 50%. And so the moment that I get kicked out of the call schedule, because I essentially asked, okay, well, you're leaving, you can keep your privileges, but we're not going to let you take call. We don't need you in the call schedule. And I was like, okay, great, that's good for me, I guess. And it wasn't. It was a huge hit.
So you expected to still be in the call schedule?
I was thinking that I was going to still have call. And then when that happened, then it. But in a way, it's an opportunity. But back to Teri's point, which is, okay, well, if we know what's going on, then maybe we plan accordingly, right? Mm-hmm. Because then what that's obviously made for us is create a business development unit. And I'm on the road, I'm shaking hands, I'm doing lunches. I'm like literally having to create that 50% loss of revenue that was just falling on me from the call. Now I have to go out and chase it. Yeah. Right? But it's all about just being able to... In hindsight, it's very easy to be a Monday morning quarterback and say, fudge, this is all that we should have done and we could have done. But you learn from all these things. And obviously, I mean, Teri's seen it multiple times, and I'm sure she could have been a great advocate to that process. But that is important to count, to, as you're listening to us and you're considering doing this, is understand where that stream of patients is coming. You may be busy, but you may be unknown. And I'm sorry to break it to you that way. Because at the end of the day, the PCPs and the people in the community, if they don't know you, they're not going to, you may be this really famous person on the internet, on Twitter. That doesn't really matter at all. Yeah. You don't get referrals through Twitter. Yeah.
Well, and when you're in private practice, there are some doctors that if they have a good relationship with a hospital, they can still get Epic on a subsidized basis. But for the most part, nobody can afford Epic in private practice. It costs 5 times as much as any other ambulatory EHR. And what you're up against is if there are employed physicians that do what you do, that are, the family doctor that's employed by the hospital, when they go to place an order, consult vascular, consult cardiology, there's a drop-down list and your name isn't on the list. Mm-hmm. So they've got to be interested enough to refer to you that they are sending a referral a different way than the easiest way for them. And you can totally overcome that, but it's just another one of the structural things you have to think about and have a plan for.
I want to go back to this thing you mentioned briefly, which gives me PTSD because I have now noticed the lack of follow through that our front desks have.
Yeah,
it's really hard. I'm a one-man show, Teri, and so I get, I'm out there building relationships, building all these things, and then when you shake the trees, the things fall. And what do? Well, I'm like, hey, I'm being sent this patient. Here's a face sheet. For me, it's out of sight, out of mind. I'm supposing that whoever's doing that is going to understand the importance of getting that person here.
Mm-hmm.
And here's what happens. 3.2 seconds on the phone goes to voicemail. Oh, hey, we're calling you from Hope asking podiatry calls. If you have a minute, thank you, bye. And then they put LVM, left voicemail. I literally will throw myself off the building if I go into another patient chart and it says LVM. And it's like, somehow, LVM, we did what we had. Our job was LVM, and we don't have to do anything. Are you kidding me?
But when you hire, that should be like on the forefront. Like, you are like a hound dog. Your job is to like be a private investigator. And
but you would be surprised with the lack of because this, these are not high paying jobs, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it's people that don't have necessarily the experience or the motive. Nobody's going to have the motivation other than yourself. I mean, you can add some stuff in the middle, like your business development person may have some interest because there's a bonus structure, yada yada, but not front desk, not referral managers. Like, there's all this stuff there. So, Teri, and I'm just using you here as my free minute, free minute of advice.
Love it. Bring the questions.
How do you do to refurbish and reculture and incentivize these people that potentially may be at a very low, salary, hourly salary? I mean, they don't have a huge education. They're front desk people, they're secretaries. To understand that they're as crucial as a doctor, because a doctor is meaningless if the patient doesn't come so that I can care for them.
So I'm a great believer in creating systems that support people in wanting to do the right thing and making sure that management can see what's going on. And so that particular problem, here's my good free, consulting that maybe this will transform your life. So my clients, I set up a system using software that's not, we actually give this software for free to our clients, but it's software we use for a lot of different things. But basically, every time a new referral comes in, there's a little form, electronic form that has like 6 or 7 fields they fill out that puts that referral in a database. And that database is time stamped. And so it shows, when did this come in? And then they have to process what the process is in that database. They got to say, I left a message on this date, and what's the follow-up? And that data, that we take the data from that and populate it into a dashboard and a business intelligence tool called Power BI. And actually, Lucas has seen this. I think he referred to it earlier. And so the management team needs to be looking at that every week. And so for my practices that listen to my advice, and by the way, they don't all listen to everything we suggest, but my
advice is as good as the follow through, right?
Yeah. We're looking, and we know we had X number of referrals this month. 84% of them have been scheduled for a new patient appointment. 10% of them, the patient said, no, thanks. My brother-in-law works for your competition. I'm going there. Right. And this percent that's remaining has not been addressed, because if we see that, then we can hold the people involved accountable and say, what's happening with these other 15 referrals? These are basically revenue sitting in sitting in limbo. We need to work it to the ground. But it's also motivating for them, right? Because if they can see that month after month after month, their conversion ratio is getting a little better, then, you can give them an attaboy or an attagirl, or you can give them a bonus, or you can determine that you've got someone on your team that doesn't care repetitively, and that person isn't somebody that needs to work at Hope Vascular. But the point is you have to have a system to measure everything that matters in your business, and you have to have a way to visualize what those results are.
Yeah,
Visualization
the
is
visual
important.
representation of data is like key.
I was about to say visual is really important.
Yeah.
Because if you're busy, you're doing tons of things. And let's say you say, okay, Teri, we got 1 hour a week. And in 1 hour, we got to understand what's happening. That visual representation, this Power BI that you're mentioning, then becomes just money, man, right? I mean, it's just, okay, you got 1 hour to relay a message about operational health. And it could be very astute, obviously, but then relatively simple to potentially say, okay, where are we dropping the ball and where do the assets need to be remanaged? Do you need to hire somebody here? Do you need to fire somebody here? Do you need to move a little, what? So the idea, that's what's hard, I think, is understanding where to find those pressure points and then create, to your point, Teri, a measurable outcome. Because then it's like, okay, well, we're getting in, but the ultrasounds are long.
Mm-hmm.
The appointment for an ultrasound is taking 4 weeks.
Yeah.
Okay, well, then that means we need maybe another ultrasound machine, right? Or is the scheduling of the ultrasound being perfect? No, well, there's a lot of last minute cancellations. Oh, shit. Well, because I'm like, I see my texts, they're not working all the time. So it can't be that the appointment is 4 weeks. Like, how in the world is it that I see them having coffee in the middle of the day? They're like, well, patients just don't come to the appointments. Oh, God. So we got to go back and understand, what do we do to not only get the appointment, but to see the follow through and to understand that those patients has to come. It is just, it doesn't end, right? I mean, it's just this ongoing evaluation and reevaluation of all these elements that are very dynamic.
Absolutely. Every person that works in your business, there should be at least one, if not more, numbers that they live by. It could be the person who's confirming appointments. What percentage no-shows do we have? And what do we think that number should be in the maximum? And how do we drive it down if it's above where we want? You're looking at, when do you hire your next sonographer? Well, what percentage of the ultrasound room capacity is being utilized? And if you're watching that trend up and up and up and getting tighter and tighter, and you're also seeing how long it takes to get a patient scheduled for appointment, that's when you know to pull the trigger. It's time to hire. But everybody in the business has to have numbers that they're accountable for performing to. And it doesn't, I don't mean that in a draconian way.
Punitive. Yeah.
Actually, culture is the number one determinant of whether you're going to be successful or not, because you can't do everything yourself. And you've got to be able to create a culture where the people that work for you understand what you expect and are super motivated to deliver that.
Do you send physicians to get trained by business coaches, leadership coaches, or anything like that? Do you recommend that as part of your
that's sort of
services?
what I do. So if you look at within our team of consultants, people all have different things that they really specialize in and focus on. And so, my partner, Dawn Harris McLean, runs the consulting firm day to day. And she oversees the team that does most of the development projects. So if you're starting a new OBL or a new practice, I've done that before, but it's not actually what I love doing. Most of my personal time is spent in physician coaching on just those kinds of things we're talking about. And then leadership development, helping physician practices as they grow. And you need to have people that are helping you manage the business, helping them be the best at their job that they can be, and figuring out how to get the whole team rowing in the direction you want them rowing in.
So Teri, if you have you ever encountered situations where like, hey, this is a private practice, it's going well, but it seems like it could be better. I need you to come and do a deep dive, spend the month, you look at the books, look at everything, tell me what you think we're doing okay, great, and bad. Is that work that you guys would do?
Yeah. So one of the few things we do on a fixed fee basis are operational assessments. And so you're very generous with your estimate of it taking a month to do that. But I would lose people if I had to work that long to give them answers about what matters and what to do. So typically for us, we do either a targeted assessment on revenue cycle management, because that's like huge pain point for practices over and over. So we do a lot of RCM assessments, or we'll do more of a holistic assessment where we look at every aspect of the business. And the whole process might take a month, but it's not a month's worth of work. I mean, it's a couple of days on site. It's reviewing, documents, interviewing people, talking to the physicians. And what takes the extra time is getting prepared to come and writing up the report afterward. But we do those all the time. And part of the reason I try to offer those things on a fixed fee basis is a very good bet for me from a business perspective, because it is very rare I come into a practice and do an assessment that I don't find all kinds of things going on that could be better. And many times the doctor is worried about issue A. They have no idea that issue D and E are going on in their business. And so inevitably, after I give a great, insightful assessment to someone and, open their eyes to all the things places they could be losing money, or places where they could be more successful, the first question they have is, can you help us fix this? So, doing the assessments are usually the entry point for us if we're coming into an existing practice and helping.
Are you of the idea when you come and you realize there's all these potential tiny little fires? Wasn't that the name of the show? There's a show, Tiny Little Fires, I think it was called. No? Anyway,
I don't know.
it was great. It was a small city with a lot of drama. But anyway.
You're saying Big Little Lies?
No, Tiny Little Fire. I'm making that up, by the way. I'm sure
You
you're
are
making that up. It should be a show.
Did you just make up a show?
Yeah, it's called Hope Vascular and Podiatry. Tiny Little Fires. Yeah. Would you think that at the end of the day, if you realize there are people that are underperforming, the solution more times than none is guidance and training, or you're just not well equipped for this position? We are going to fire or let this person go and find the right asset. What is, all in all, after your years of analysis, when you come and you realize that there are things that are landing on one person, the remediary process is either changing directions completely or giving them a little bit of help?
Yeah, there's 3 variables, right? Or 3 pathways. One is we can coach or train this person or give them a better tool so that they can get better at their job. One is we don't think they're ever going to get where we need to be and we need to fire them. The third is they have a lot of redeeming value and they have some good qualities, but they're in the wrong seat on the bus. And so we change what the focus of their role is. And that's not always possible, but sometimes it is. So, I just have been working with a client that was underperforming because of staffing problems. They're a very large practice, and they have, 130 employees in a specific area that they just chronically were, 10, 15% understaffed. And so when we did the assessment, one of the things that came out of it was your practice administrator is a phenomenal guy. He is sharp at finance. He has led your group with through a period of unbelievable growth in terms of the footprint and revenues, but he really doesn't like leading people. He is very uncomfortable with that side of the business. And so, after, it's a process, right? But actually that individual is now the CFO and super happy in that role. And the idea was we'll hire another practice administrator, which immediately the first thing the doctors are like, whoa, isn't that going to increase our overhead? But in reality, making that investment has led them to much better results in staffing that have led them to much better financial results. And so, they had someone that they weren't willing to part ways with, but he was just in the wrong seat on the bus. But sometimes you have to be willing to be courageous and let someone go. And usually it's because they don't have the right values. They don't treat people the right way. That's typically unrecoverable.
Can we touch a little bit about the topic of OBL versus ASC? There
Sure.
is the how big of a roadblock is it to go directly to an ASC? Is it worth it? Is the increased reimbursement on the ASC side compared to the OBL side worth looking at that as a option, or are the roadblocks to get credentialing cost just too much to surmount?
So if they don't fix what's going on with the physician fee schedule, at some point, it's really going to be hard. So every year the reimbursements go down. Your costs are going up for labor, for supplies, for rent, utilities, everything. And so every year the OBL fee schedule goes down. Every year the ASC fee schedule goes up. And this is the first year that in our estimation that for a endovascular practice that does a lot of peripheral work, the reimbursement in the ASC makes more sense. And it's because, for so long, even though some of the primary codes paid more in the ASC, you don't get the add-on codes in the ASC. So it was still more favorable in the OBL. But we've sort of crossed the Rubicon now. The ASC reimbursement is higher. The challenge is the cost of developing an ASC is much higher. And the degree of difficulty for credentialing an ASC is much higher. So if you have a lot of financial resources and you can, deal with that lift, then I would say do an ASC. For some people, that's not possible because it's their first, foray. And so they need to be able to get their contracts in 6 months, not 18 months, from insurance companies. For some, it is they're in a state where there's a certificate of need that really makes it too difficult to get approval to do an ASC. And we still do tons of OBL projects all the time, but there's definitely more of a trend with vascular surgeons moving to ASC than there were 3 years ago. And so when one of our clients wants to do that, and part of our feasibility study analysis is often weighing which one it makes more sense for you. But even if you're going, doing an ASC makes more sense, you've got to have a plan that if it's possible to do it as a hybrid, because the credentialing lift is super heavy for an ASC.
I also it's a couple of things. One is it seems to me like with an ASC you are also potentially putting yourselves in a more complex ecosystem. So if you say, okay, well, an OBL, the overhead and the operational needs can be sustained by me and myself. if I want to do this ASC project and I don't necessarily have the bandwidth financially, I mean, because I don't think there's a lot of doctors out there that can just build an ASC and have it sitting there, right? I mean, it takes money to build, it takes money to maintain, it takes money to staff. And so then you start thinking about, okay, well, let's do it with this guy and this guy and this guy and this guy. And oh, that other company wants 20% equity and they're going to be managing partners, with an 8% or whatever. Blah, blah, blah. And then all of a sudden you're like, oh my God, it's so complicated. Like this ecosystem seems to be, when I see that, I see other people that I don't necessarily trust, other entities that I don't necessarily trust, and all these moving parts versus maybe making a little bit less money, but it's my operation and I understand what's happening. And that's been my adversity to this ASC model. I'm just not capable of sustaining the transition probably alone as a solo practitioner. And the option at this point for me is an option that's just uncomfortable. I'm not comfortable letting all these other people in the pot.
I don't think you're wrong about that. So a lot of the people that are doing ASCs are large enough that one practice has enough physicians that they can fill it. But if that's not the case, and you can go multi-specialty. Now there's some synergies with that, right? Because you can't as easily collaborate with people that are not part of your own practice in an OBL setting. It's challenging to do from a regulatory perspective. So with an ASC, it can be a way for you to, without hiring a podiatrist, work together, with a podiatrist in a common enterprise. But you're not wrong that most of the people who have done ASCs physicians are either in the cosmetic surgery space. They do a one-room surgery center, and it's not as expensive because it's cash. They don't have to follow the Medicare conditions of coverage. And so it's a lot easier to do, and they really need to do it. Or the flip side is they were people that were doing it and doing it with management companies. They're either partnering with their hospital and the hospital's running it, or they're partnering with someone, a big management company, and there are several. I don't believe in that because you're giving away equity. I don't think physicians should be giving away equity to people. And so we started Doc-Centric Surgery Centers, which is the ambulatory surgery center development company I have, to try to figure out how to do this in a more physician-friendly way. And we just applied some of the same concepts we did in the OBL space, which is, okay, the doctors need to own it, number one, but they need help, and they have to have the same freedom to fire us if they don't like our work that they do on the OBL side. Because that's one of the hallmarks of our relationship with our clients is that you have the flexibility to tell us to take a hike because we're not owners if we don't do a good job. We got to show up and earn our keep every day, or you'll get rid of us. And so when we do a billing contract for someone, it can't be month to month. We have to have a defined term in the contract, but it's not forever. But if you build an ambulatory surgery center and you've got a management company as a significant investor in it, they will have a management contract in perpetuity, a billing contract in perpetuity because of their ownership stake. And if the pricing changes for those things, there's no ability to renegotiate. I know a guy who is in an ASC and the management fees are 15% of collections, which is way above the market. The current market's 8% for management and billing for an ASC.
That's crazy.
But he's stuck.
Do you think that the powers that be in Washington or whatever are somehow, moving these codes to the ASC? I understand the message of we need more control, more regulations. OBLs can be the wild, wild west. I get that. But is it not also this way of allowing hospitals, like we had parted way with the hospitals. A lot of us really fought the hospitals on our way out. We were seeking independence. And now starting to move the pendulum to the ASC allows hospitals to gain a little bit of control again, to have equity partnerships, and then within a few years to start buying up our ASCs. And then boom, we're back being hospital employees after doing all this to try to shackle off from that system. That's one thing that I'm philosophically afraid of here.
Well, I don't think that CMS and their payment policies, you give them too much credit if you think they could actually orchestrate a payment policy that would have an intended effect. I mean, it's just the constant unintended consequences. And so, listen,
they're probably lobbying groups. They're probably hospital lobbying groups that are guiding them.
There are, but I mean, it's actually just the way that it's just the way the system is designed. The Medicare fee schedule drives an OBL, and the Medicare fee schedule is set up with a certain set of regulations. So it's not OBL specific, it's about physician fee schedule versus ASCs and hospitals. CMS does treat them similarly, and the structure for it, reflects that. But to your comment about hospitals, here's what I see. 5 years ago, if a bunch of doctors wanted to get together and build an ASC and move their cases out of the hospitals were fighting them tooth and nail. Now they're realizing physicians are going to do it anyway. And if I act like this, I'm going to get left in the dust. So now what I'm seeing is I'm having conversations with hospital CEOs that are like, hey, how about if the doctors own the majority of the ASC, they can run it themselves or hire whoever they want to run it. Will you let us own 30% of it? Because they figure 30% is better than zero. Because and I'm seeing that in multiple markets that hospitals are interested. Whether the doctors need the hospital as an investor is a very market-specific question. There, one place that I'm working on, there's very restrictive CON, issues at stake, and having a hospital be part of the project might be the only thing that makes it possible. So now it's about just negotiating for my client to make sure the hospital can't have enough control to screw it up after it opens. But in other markets, there's no value in having the hospital. It just depends on what the situation is.
Well, a lot to digest.
Lots to digest.
Huge topic.
I knew Teri was going to be a great guest.
Great and amazing.
Amazing guest.
I mean, your experience is it's huge relevance. Our listeners, I think, are going to be super interested in this pod. And if anybody out there is interested in pursuing a conversation with you, Teri, what would be the best way to connect with you?
Well, so I'm pretty big into LinkedIn. I know a lot of doctors are on Twitter, but or X, whatever we're calling it this week, but I'm pretty big into LinkedIn so that a lot of people find me that way. And my company is Accountable Physician Advisors, so they can check us out on, find our website, or however else people message through this platform. But my business partner is much better at the social media marketing part, I'll confess. I'm pretty nerdy, and so she's better at that part of things than I am.
We'll put the address, the hyperlink in the show notes, and we'll make sure that we allude to it when we go live with the program. But I want to say thank you for your time. I know this is a weekend. We'd love for you to get back and have some fun and not talk business only, but we're really being appreciative. We really appreciate you.
Really appreciate it. Thank you, Teri.
Well, thank you so much for having me. This is a lot of fun. And it's always interesting to hear kind of what you're going through in the real world, as not one of my clients, just hearing how other people are doing it. So thank you for sharing some of those perspectives about what's happening. I hope.
Well, awesome, Teri. You have a blessed weekend, and we'll be in touch. Thank you much.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Two vascular surgeons walk into a bar and come out with a podcast. We are talking everything vascular and not. Welcome to the Life of Flow podcast.